Some families teach you how to love. Mine taught me how to survive. Have you ever lived in a house where every laugh had conditions, every hug came with expectations, and every time you spoke up, you were told you were too sensitive? This is Rachel's story, a girl silenced, bruised, and dismissed by the very people who were supposed to protect her. But instead of breaking, she built something stronger. Not revenge by force, but justice, with proof, paperwork, and the quiet kind of power no one sees coming. Stick around until the end, because how she rewrites her life will leave you speechless. Brooklyn mornings used to be about warmth, the clink of coffee mugs, the soft hum of the subway in the distance, the scent of cinnamon oatmeal. But that day, all of it vanished. What filled the air instead was something brittle, like tension that had solidified. Kendall stood across from me in our small kitchen, arms folded like armor, fury already rising up her neck. Her hair, always perfectly curled, shook slightly from the adrenaline she hadn't even tried to hide. "I told you not to touch my things!" She didn't wait for a response. Her coffee mug slammed against the counter so hard I thought it would shatter. My heart jumped, but I stood still, a glass of water in my hand. The only thing I had come for. "I didn't touch anything," I said calmly, though my chest tightened with every word. "I haven't even stepped into your room." That didn't matter. She moved fast, always did. Before my brain could even finish processing the threat in her glare, her elbow jabbed into my ribs. Sharp, intentional, all her weight behind it. I heard a crack. Or maybe it was just my hope for peace finally breaking. The glass of water slipped from my hand and exploded into pieces on the tile. The pain rushed in like a tidal wave, starting at my side and radiating out. I couldn't breathe. "Mom!" I cried out, one hand gripping the fridge to keep myself standing. From the living room came the dull rustle of a phone screen and a lazy voice. "Oh, Rachel, not again." I waited. For footsteps, for a concerned face, for anything that resembled care. Nothing. "She didn't mean it," Mom called, still glued to her phone. "You're so dramatic. And don't even think about calling the police. She's got a job interview tomorrow. That'll ruin everything." I looked at her, lying there in her faded robe, her legs tucked up like it was just another Tuesday. And maybe for her it was. For me, I was hunched in pain, ribs splintered, breath sharp like glass. I went to my room and closed the door slowly. Not slammed. I didn't want the noise. I didn't want Kendall coming back. That night, I lay on my side, every inhale a razor. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how I got here. 23 years old, working 2 part-time jobs, studying when I could, cut off from health insurance the moment I turned 18, and every dollar I made vanished into my mother's requests. Groceries, she'd said. But groceries somehow meant Kendall's acrylic nails, bottomless brunches, and tanning packages. The apartment wasn't mine. The bed I laid on, paid in installments. Even my phone plan still ran through Mom. And still, I felt guilty. The next morning, Kendall was back in the kitchen, bright, humming, drinking orange juice I bought. Her bruiser act replaced by brunch girl energy. She glanced at me, smirked. "You always bruise like a banana." I said nothing. I sat down, calmly, quietly, and I planned. Because something inside me had changed. It wasn't just about the bruise anymore, or the crack in my rib, or the indifference in my mother's voice. It was the years, the missed birthdays, the stolen boyfriends, the gaslit nights, the lies. And now, Kendall had something to lose, and I, for once, had something better. Proof. To be continued. The human body is surprisingly loud when it's trying to heal. Every breath that next morning hissed through clenched teeth. Every shift in my position pulled a string of nerves that screamed louder than I ever did. I lay there staring at the ceiling, ribs aching, trying not to move, trying not to cry. I wanted to believe it was just bruised, that my imagination had gone too far. But no amount of wishful thinking could ignore the feeling in my chest when I breathed. It wasn't just pain, it was betrayal embedded in the bone. I couldn't afford to go to the hospital. I hadn't had health insurance since the day I turned 18. My mother said it was time I learned to stand on my own, which, in her version of love, meant standing on one leg while the other was kicked out from under me. All the money I earned since then had gone toward bills. Or at least that's what she claimed. But somehow those bills always lined Kendall's life. Her eyelash appointments, her $9 smoothies, her Uber rides home from dates she never remembered the names of. That morning I crawled out of bed, literally. Every movement sent heat crawling up my spine. But I moved anyway. I stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom and lifted my shirt. The bruise had already started to bloom. It was deep maroon in the center, ringed with the angry yellow of something older, a kind of galaxy of violence across my ribs. I stood there shaking, not because of fear, but because I finally saw it for what it was. Undeniable. I grabbed my phone. I took pictures. I recorded a video. The way my breath faltered, the way I winced just turning my body to the side. I recorded the sound of the silence in the house, the kind of silence that screamed complicity. Then I played back what I had recorded the night before. Mom's voice, barely annoyed. "Don't call the police, you'll ruin her job interview." I saved everything. I sent it to a backup email, then another, then to a friend I hadn't talked to in months, just with the subject line, "Keep this, just in case." It was the first time in my life I felt like I was preparing for war. That same day, I found a walk-in urgent care clinic 3 blocks from work. I walked there hunched, biting my lip against every bump in the sidewalk. The doctor was kind, middle-aged, tired, probably too used to seeing women flinch when asked how they got hurt. "Fell in the kitchen," I said quickly, avoiding his eyes. He didn't press, just nodded and scribbled something down. "You've got a fractured rib," he confirmed after a few minutes. "You need rest and pain meds, nothing strenuous for at least a few weeks." I nodded. I didn't tell him I still had to walk home, climb 3 flights of stairs, and probably do dishes because no one else would. The bill was more than my rent. I paid with a credit card I hadn't used in months. I had sworn off debt. But this wasn't indulgence. This was survival. And survival, I realized as I limped home, doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like bruises under a sweater. Sometimes it looks like gathering your own receipts. But it was the first time in my life I had something undeniable in my corner. Proof that I wasn't making it up. Proof that I wasn't crazy. And that was the first crack in their version of reality, the first step toward mine. 2 days passed. Kendall strutted through the apartment like a woman with the world in her palm. She had a bounce in her step and a smugness in her voice as she bragged to Mom about her upcoming interview with Alder and Brook Publishing. "They want someone fresh, someone real," she chirped, flipping her hair like she was already on the cover of a magazine. "Not some uptight Ivy League snob. They want my energy." I sat in the corner with an ice pack on my side, listening in silence. I had known for years that Kendall was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one whose tantrums were labeled as passion and whose lies were covered with a family smile. But this job interview? This was the first time I saw something she truly wanted, and I knew it was time to change the story. That evening, she left her laptop open on the dining table, sloppy, confident, arrogant. I walked past it slowly, paused. Her resume filled the screen, clean, professional, polished, except for one glaring detail, a reference listed under the name of Professor Dawson. I knew that name. I also knew Kendall had once called her a bitter hag on Twitter after she failed a literature paper. She'd gone viral for the post, deleted it a week later. But the internet doesn't forget. I took a photo of the screen, then I opened my email. Subject line, candidate concern. I wrote to Alder and Brook's HR department, attaching everything: the audio recording of Mom protecting Kendall, the photos of my injuries, the video of my fractured breathing, the screenshot of her resume, and a link to the archived tweet. My final line was simple: "This is the kind of person you are considering to represent your brand." I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to, because Kendall had spent her life assuming no one would ever hold her accountable. But now I had facts. I had truth. And for the first time in my life, I was using it. The next morning, Kendall floated into the apartment like she was already hired. She wore a crisp beige blazer, just a bit too expensive for someone with no job, and heels that clicked with confidence across the hardwood floor. I watched her reach for the necklace, my necklace, the one Grandma had left for me in her will, the one Mom insisted Kendall should have. "She'll wear it more," Mom had shrugged, as if legacy was about screen time. Kendall clasped it around her neck and smiled at her reflection like the world was already clapping. "Wish me luck," she chirped, grabbing her bag. I said nothing, just nodded, calm, like the sea right before a storm. She left at 9:12 a.m. By 12:46 p.m., the front door slammed so hard it rattled the dishes in the cabinets. Kendall stormed in, heels in hand, makeup streaked, voice shaking. They knew. She threw her purse across the room. It thudded against the wall and collapsed like her composure. "They knew everything!" she screamed. Mom rushed from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "What happened, sweetie? What do you mean they knew?" Kendall spun around, frantic. "They said they got an anonymous email, with photos, with audio. They brought up that stupid tweet about Dawson. They said it was archived, that they contacted her." She looked like a mirror cracked from corner to corner. Furious, terrified, caught. "Who would do that to you?" Mom gasped, rubbing Kendall's back like she was the victim. Kendall's eyes swept the room, then landed on me. She didn't need proof. She knew. "You," she whispered. I tilted my head. Funny how the truth always finds its way to the surface, huh? The silence that followed was deafening. I turned and walked away. That night they screamed at each other. Mom yelled about betrayal. Kendall cried about reputation. Dishes were slammed, walls were pounded. The apartment sounded like a sinking ship. I stayed in my room, door locked, lights off, calm, because this wasn't rage, it was justice. The next morning, an email hit Kendall's inbox, a permanent blacklisting from Alder and Brooke. They had also forwarded their findings to her university's ethics board, citing concerns over falsified internship hours and academic dishonesty. She wailed. I listened. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just existed. Because when someone spends years tearing you down, your silence becomes the loudest sentence you can write. Kendall spiraled. She tried damage control, reached out to former professors, begged for character letters, tried rewriting her resume. But the cracks had formed, and cracks like that don't just go away. Meanwhile, I kept collecting screenshots, bank transfers labeled groceries that ended up as beauty subscriptions, voicemails where Mom promised to pay me back once Kendall got back on her feet. Receipts. So many receipts. Because if they were going to treat me like I was invisible, the least I could do was watch them clearly and document everything they thought I'd forget. This wasn't revenge. This was the beginning of rewriting the story they thought they controlled. This was me, holding the pen. For the first time, they didn't know what page came next, and I didn't plan on showing them. There's a moment, quiet and sharp, when a person realizes they were never supposed to win. Not in this house, not in this family. It hit me that week. Kendall was unraveling, loudly. She stormed through the apartment like a hurricane trapped in a glass bottle, breaking little things and blaming the air. Mom oscillated between pretending nothing was happening and offering desperate affirmations. "It'll blow over. They're just being dramatic. You're still their top choice, sweetheart." But I wasn't watching them anymore. I was reading. Legal aid websites, tenant rights, financial abuse statutes, trust fund structures. I read until my eyes burned. Then I made the call. The woman on the other end of the line was kind, firm, clear. "Yes, Rachel. What you're describing isn't just emotional abuse. It's financial exploitation. If you have documentation, we can help." I had more than documentation. I had years, bank statements, Venmo screenshots, texts, voicemails, and the biggest bombshell, a copy of Grandpa's will. The one Mom said had disappeared. The one I found while going through a dusty drawer of papers she forgot to shred. The apartment wasn't hers. It never had been. Grandpa had put it in my name when I turned 18, as backup. "Just in case your mother makes the kind of choices she always makes," he'd said once in a rare moment of honesty. I hadn't understood what he meant back then. Now I did. The trust fund Mom claimed was lost in taxes? Still there, still mine. Quietly accumulating while she begged for rent money and told me it was for the light bill. I called the property attorney. 2 weeks later, the paperwork was in motion. The apartment, the same walls that had absorbed my silence for years, was legally mine. I didn't have to scream, I just had to sign. The day I printed the documents, I made 3 copies, one for me, one for legal aid, and one that I slid gently into an envelope and left on the kitchen counter beside a fresh eviction notice. I didn't wait for them to come home. I didn't need to see the moment the illusion cracked. But I imagined it, clearly. Mom opening the envelope with one manicured nail, expecting a bill or some offer for cable. Her lips pressing into a thin line as she read my name on the deed, her eyes widening, then narrowing. Kendall shouting, denying, demanding. I could already hear the chorus. You can't do this. But the thing is, I already had. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe one. They had never given me the courtesy of explanation, only expectation. And for the first time in my life, I had exceeded it. That night, I slept better than I had in years. No one banged on my door. No one shouted from the hallway. No one mocked my silence. Because now, it wasn't silence. It was power. And it echoed louder than anything they had ever said to me. 30 days. That's what the paper said. 30 days to vacate. 30 days to scream, deny, twist, and threaten. And they used every one of them. Kendall tried applying for jobs. She changed her name on resumes, edited her LinkedIn, deleted tweets, and even dyed her hair. But bad news travels fast, and HR departments are small worlds in big cities. No one wanted her. She screamed at rejection emails. She sobbed when her phone didn't ring. She threatened lawsuits no one took seriously. But under all that noise was the one thing she had never truly known before: consequence. Mom moved between two roles. One minute, she was the guilt tripper, sighing dramatically while folding laundry that wasn't hers. The next, she was the gaslighter in chief. You've always been sensitive. She didn't mean to hurt you. She was just going through a lot. But none of them ever said what I needed to hear. Not once did I hear, I'm sorry. Not once did they ask, are you okay? Instead, Dad muttered something one morning over burnt toast that made my hands clench around my coffee mug. This apartment was never meant to be yours anyway. I didn't flinch. I just looked up, dead in the eyes, and replied, funny, the deed says otherwise. The days ticked down. Week 4 arrived. Kendall started packing. By packing, I mean stuffing clothes into garbage bags, slamming drawers, cursing under her breath. She made a show of it, as if volume could earn her a trophy. Then came the night before the deadline. She barged into my room without knocking. The door cracked against the wall. She stood there, wild-eyed, like someone about to deliver a final blow. You're ruining everything, she snapped. You're so obsessed with being the victim that you forgot how to be a sister. I stood slowly. Years ago, that sentence might have crushed me. Now, it was just air. Being your sister has meant bruises, silence, and pretending you're normal when you're not, I said, voice calm, even. I didn't forget how to be one. I just stopped accepting abuse as love. She blinked, once, twice. Then she hurled her coffee mug across the room. It shattered against the wall inches from my head. Still, I didn't flinch. I reached for my phone, held it up like a flag. One word, I said. Police. She froze, then backed out, slammed the door. I didn't sleep that night, not from fear, from clarity, because this wasn't about a cracked rib anymore. It wasn't about missed birthdays or stolen boyfriends. This was about reclaiming a life that had been chipped away, day by day, under the disguise of family. And that life? It was mine now. When the movers came the next day, they were met with silence. No goodbyes, no tears, just Mom yelling about betrayal, Kendall dragging 2 bags behind her like trophies of loss, and Dad pretending the floor needed his full attention. I didn't watch them leave. I didn't need to. I stood in the middle of the hallway and listened. No slamming doors, no sarcastic comments, no footsteps stomping toward a fight, just silence. And for the first time, it didn't mean fear. It meant peace. They were gone. No trace, no apology, no note slipped under my door. Just the quiet thud of a front door that didn't slam, because even rage has its limits when there's nothing left to control. I stood in the center of the living room, still in my pajamas, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold in my hand. All around me was proof. Silence wasn't absence anymore. It was presence. It was power. It was mine. I didn't rush to clean up. I let the echo of their chaos fade on its own. When I did move, it wasn't to fix. It was to transform. I painted the hallway a soft shade of green, tossed out the couch Kendall always claimed, donated Mom's crystal collection to the community center thrift shop. It felt symbolic. Then I opened the door to Kendall's old room. The air inside felt stale, like a theater after a bad play. Her posters, her mirrors, her perfumes lined up like soldiers. I took them down one by one, and in that same room, where she once yelled at me for breathing too loud, I put up my easel, canvas, paints, sketchbooks. I turned it into an art studio, the one thing I was always told would never pay bills, the thing they laughed off every time I mentioned it, the dream I had shelved because survival demanded sacrifice. But now, I was done sacrificing. A week later, I opened my email and stared at a subject line I'd avoided for months. Full scholarship reinstatement, the University of Chicago. I clicked. They still wanted me. They had waited. I hadn't even told them why I deferred. I didn't owe them that. But they saw my previous work, my essays, my voice, and they said yes. This time, I said yes back. Not with fear, with freedom. Months passed like chapters. I packed, I moved, I studied, I painted. My art picked up online. I started freelancing, ironically, for companies Kendall used to name drop during her fake interviews. The professors called me disciplined. The classmates called me brilliant. But I didn't need titles. I just needed space. And I had finally made it. One afternoon, in between class and a coffee run, I got a message on LinkedIn. Anonymous profile. Did you really ruin your sister's life just to get into school? I stared at it, then typed back. No, I rebuilt mine. She just got caught in the debris of what she destroyed. Then I logged off. Last I heard, Kendall was couch hopping with a friend 2 cities over. Mom and Dad were staying with an aunt who didn't believe in playing referee to grown-up children. I didn't call. I didn't check. Instead, I spent holidays with friends who asked about my mental health instead of my job status, who remembered my birthday without needing a Facebook notification, who hugged me without conditions. On graduation day, the second time around, I wore Grandma's necklace, the one Mom once said Kendall would wear better. I walked across the stage, chin high. The applause didn't shake the auditorium. It didn't need to, because this time, I was the one holding the pen. And the ending? It was finally mine. Not every family gives you unconditional love. Sometimes growing up means realizing that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That speaking up isn't drama, it's healing. And that silence? It can be the sharpest blade when used by someone who's finally done being ignored. If you've ever been made to feel small inside your own home, this story is for you. Share this video with someone who needs to know they're not alone. Tap like if it moved you. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that speak the truth no one wants to say out loud. Because here on this channel, we give the mic back to those who were never allowed to hold it.